Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Brever, and alongside me is Logan Camden, and we've got a good one for you guys today. We are going to be ranking the top 10 guard peaks in NBA history. This was a ton of fun to do, but also excruciatingly painful because there were a couple of cuts that just really hurt. I wish we could have done a top 12, but that's not a nice, clean, round, sexy number, Logan. We got to give the people a nice, clean, round, sexy number. But before we do get into the top 10 itself, let's talk about a couple of those guys who were the toughest cuts, who are the top honorable mentions. Who are those guys for you, Logan?
I think the toughest guy that I had to cut off of my list was James Harden. And I really wanted to get James Harden on my list, man. I was actually pretty excited to talk about James today.
Wow. Look at you.
James has grown on me. Unfortunately, the one archetype that I really struggled with on this list was these very offensive slanted guards, and I ultimately could kind of only go with one on this list with how the list laid out. So I went with another guy instead in one of my final spots, and I'm going to have to boot Harden off. I know that sounds crazy because in the regular season at his peak, the guy's averaging 34, 6, and 8 on 62% true shooting. The thing I would say, and this is what I've always been critical for James Harden of, is the slight drop-off in the playoffs, the heliocentric style of play and the ball dominance, and just the efficiency, like the turnover numbers taking a step back in the playoffs. But I really thought Harden was going to fall into my 10 spot. Unfortunately, he was one of the tougher cuts. And then kind of in that same vein, another one of my tougher cuts, may be surprising to people, but that was prime Damian Lillard, man. I have such an immense amount of respect for Dame and what he was at his apex. For me, that's 2019 to 2021. He's given you 28, 4, and 7 on 61% true shooting, leading out one number 2 offense, 2 number 3 offenses. So, yeah, man, this list is just short on those archetypes, and you've got to make some business decisions. This one, admittedly, was pretty arduous.
You're a big Dame guy, Logan, and I'm a big Dame guy as well, but you really love Dame. Harden, for me, was the second toughest cut. And there were two really, really painful cuts for me. He was one of them because you mentioned, the offensive peak, especially in the regular season, is so ridiculous. It's all-time scoring volume with really good efficiency. The highest regular season isolation scoring peak we've probably ever seen. Nobody has ever done it with the sheer volume that Harden was compared to the rest of the league. Dominant pick and roll scoring, obviously incredible high volume 3-point pull-up shooting and free throw production while being one of the better playmakers in basketball. Really incredible stuff that he did, especially in that 2018 to 2020 range. But I do think there is a playoff drop-off, and it's not a coincidence. And yes, we're holding him to this incredibly high standard. That's why I think sometimes people are actually too hard on playoff Harden because they're judging him up against these monumental numbers he put up in the regular season. But now we're talking about the top 10 guard peaks of all time, and the standard is monumentally high. And that's just where I think his lack of versatility as a scorer does hurt him. His extreme reliance on the pull-up and step-back 3, which he struggled with in various playoff runs in his career, that does hurt his efficiency and production. His reliance on, at times, grifting and getting to the line and just not being able to count on the free throw production at quite the same rate in the playoffs, that gives him a little bit of a knock. So those are the factors where I just don't think you were getting the best version of Harden in the biggest moments. And there's a couple other guys who are at monumentally high offensive peaks who have a lot of the same defensive problems, but who I do prefer as my offensive engines and whose games I do think translated better to the playoffs. So I'm actually going to save talking about my single toughest cut for when I talk about my number 10 spot because I debated the two of them so much. And Harden was in that mix, but I always knew that he was kind of going to be third of the three for me. That number 10 spot, though, was the toughest for me to pick on this list. So now I throw it over to you, Logan. Who do you have in the 10 spot?
I actually went with one of those guys in that archetype, the offensive slanted. I was going to say very little impactful defensively. He was a 0 defensively. I'm not going to dress it up. I've got Steve Nash in my 10th spot, and I think people would take issue with this when you're looking at the raw scoring numbers and you go, Steve Nash averaged 18 a night in the regular season, 21 a night in the playoffs. No, Steve Nash was not the scorer that James Harden was, but I do think Steve Nash was a better offensive engine, and I think his game scaled better to the playoffs. His efficiency doesn't take that much of a hit. He just drops by 2% in terms of true shooting. He's still 50, 40, 90 in the playoffs at his peak, giving you 21, 4, and 11. And I think his offenses were just better and better in the playoffs. And I think specifically Steve's style of play, and I think often Harden's style of play does get mischaracterized as, oh, he never passed the ball, this and that. No, he was very heavy isolation. He likes scoring the basketball, but he is a great passer.
Yeah.
I just think Nash's team style of play led out to better overall offenses, and I think his game did get better in the playoffs. And admittedly, I do think Harden and Nash both are a victim of circumstances. The show that we did during the all-time debates, I talked about why I thought the mid-2000 Suns were one of the best teams that never won the title. I think you could say that about the 2018 Rockets as well, and some of the great Rockets teams that Harden had. Sometimes things don't break your way, and I really do wonder how differently maybe we look at Steve Nash or James Harden's career if they do get that one ring. How much higher potentially do they rank on this list if they do climb the mountain, so to speak? Ultimately, that doesn't happen. I do think that those Rockets teams and these Suns teams are two of the best to never win. That being said, I think Nash was the better offensive engine. I think both are defensive liabilities. Obviously, Nash to a more extreme level just because of the size limitations. But I think his game scaled better to the playoffs. And I think Nash is more of a victim of circumstance. Those teams got so close every single year. But honestly, if you did have Harden on your list, I have no issue with it, man. The guy was a monster at his absolute scoring peak. And I've grown to respect James' game more and more as I have gotten older.
Yeah, James is incredible, but I do think that Nash is clearly the better offensive player, and I do have him in my number 10 spot, specifically his peak from 05 to 07, when he averages 18, 4, and 12 on plus 9.5% relative true shooting. He is arguably the most efficient scoring guard we have ever seen. And that's part of the reason I think he is underrated as a scorer, because he prioritized his playmaking first, leveraging his scoring threat to create really high efficiency opportunities for his teammates. And his individual scoring efficiency was incredible. The volume wasn't crazy, but in high stakes playoff moments, he could ratchet up the scoring volume while maintaining that all-time great playmaking as a top 3 passer we've ever seen with elite efficiency. His impact offensively is arguably top tier all time. Like, I think that Steve Nash is a top 7 offensive player we have ever seen. You could argue even a little bit higher than that. Plus 11 on-court net rating over these years, was leading out dominant teams and had a huge impact on their success. I mean, he had a plus 12 on-off split. So when he's on the court, they're utterly dominant. When he's off the court, they're a negative net rating team. And you really just can't overstate how great the Suns' offenses were. It's the best 3-year peak of team offense we've ever seen. He led out 2 of the top 5 relative offenses in NBA history in 2005 and 2007, and 2006 still led a top 2 offense in basketball with Amare Stoudemire out basically the entire year. So this is a guy who is engineering offense that is completely miles past everybody else in basketball at this time, and there's a number of reasons for that. First of all, he's the greatest pick and roll player we've ever seen. The guy was absolutely lethal as a pick and roll scorer. He was incredibly quick, but he also shot 49% from mid-range and 45% from 3 over a 6-year stretch, all the way from 2005 to 2010. Like, those are numbers you will not see from anybody else in NBA history. Effectively, just unbelievable off the dribble shot making. He's one of the greatest ball handlers we've ever seen. Of course, famously, you have the Nash dribble, just his unique ability to keep his dribble alive and probe the paint to open up scoring and playmaking opportunities. He's an incredible innovator in that sense, and just overall, the GOAT probably of generating rim assists for his teammates, of spoon feeding them looks at the basket with his aggression as a ball handler, with his aggression as a passer. It's just incredible. The team offensive results he generated every possession, if he was shooting himself or if he was passing, because the guy's a top 5 shooter and a top 3 passer ever. Nobody else in the history of this sport has that combination of being that all-time great at 2 of the most valuable traits offensively. Like the threat of having to deal with a guy who is the best three-point shooter and mid-range shooter in basketball and is absolutely lethal from floater range and is an elite ball handler and super shifty and difficult to keep out of the paint. And then once he gets in there, he can keep his dribble alive like nobody you've ever seen and manipulate and bend the defense however he wants. That guy is going to demand an insane amount of defensive attention. And then when he's also the most creative and bold and best passer in basketball, he can be clearly the best offensive player in the league and one of the best players ever without having to score with crazy volume, because everything is starting with the offensive threat that he poses and with his creation. And if you just look year after year, every single season, he is literally 95th percentile efficiency pick and roll, 95th percentile efficiency isolation, 95th percentile efficiency spot up. He was just an all-time offensive engine in the half court. And then what really sets him apart from a James Harden, from a Luka Doncic, who I'm going to talk about in a second, is his ability to be an all-time great transition offensive engine as well. Those mid-2000 Suns teams were outscoring their opponents in transition at a margin that we have never seen from another team in recorded history. They're one of the top two transition offenses ever, I would say, along with only the Showtime Lakers. Transition offense is the most efficient offense there is in basketball. So if you can consistently generate those chances more so than your opponent, you're just getting more easy offense. And that's where Nash, his ability to push pace, his ability to be maybe the greatest hit-ahead passer that we've ever seen, was so extremely valuable. And this is a guy who was phenomenal in the playoffs as well. Like, some people might try to hold it against him that he didn't win a title, but the way I view it is Steve Nash was responsible for engineering arguably the best offense we've ever seen in the regular season and the playoffs, when he averaged 21, 4, and 11 on plus 6.5% relative true shooting and led the number one playoff offense all three of these years, 05, 06, and 07, including a plus 11 relative offensive rating in 2005. That's as good a number as we've seen in the history of this sport. It might literally be the best. I haven't checked, but that's unfathomable. So he's very arguably a tier one offensive engine in the history of this game. And the defense is bad. Like, there's just no way around that. But of this group, of the really defensively flawed, but offensively masterful options that I was considering for this 10 spot, I do think he's my favorite. And it really did come down to him versus Luka, because all these guys are pretty darn close. I prefer Luka over Harden, though, because he has a lot of the same strengths in terms of being a titan as an isolation scorer, a guy who can generate extremely high three-point volume with the step back. But he's a more versatile scorer because he has the elements of the post game and the mid-range game that Harden never put together. He has that strength aspect in the playoffs where he can play bully ball and his physicality is leveraged very effectively, whereas Harden could struggle a little bit with that increased playoff physicality. I also think that Luka is the better passer of the two. Pretty clearly, Harden's a great passer, but Luka is one of the most gifted we've ever seen with his creativity and size and his vision. But Nash is, first of all, clearly the best playmaker of all these guys. Like, he's a top three passer we've seen in the history of this game. And the reason that I prefer him even over Luka is because the transition aspect is significant, that leading to such high efficiency team offense. His overall individual hyper efficiency is incredible. And I think that he is the more flexible offensive player. Now, that's not to say that Nash wasn't ball dominant, because he was, but he does have more off-ball value because of his absolutely elite shooting, and generally, he's just more selfless. He's not going to say, okay, we are going to play my brand of basketball, which is strangle the pace in the half court, and I'm going to dribble the air out of the ball a bunch of times, which Harden and Luka could both do masterfully. But at the end of the day, if you can play an up-tempo style, and if you can quickly create and maximize advantages and create super high efficiency offense for your teammates, that's basically the best thing you can do as an offensive engine. And that's what Nash did as well as anybody we've ever seen in the history of this game. There's a reason he let out the best offensive run in terms of team results that we've seen and was so ridiculously impactful. Like, you can't overstate what Steve Nash did in 2005. The fact that people dispute that MVP is so crazy and so disrespectful to me. The guy took over a team that won 29 games, that was 21st in offensive rating, and had a guy who was considered a star point guard in Stephon Marbury, who played like half that season, and he comes in and immediately they win 62 games, and they're arguably the greatest offense the game has ever seen. That's the value of Steve Nash. That's why I have him in my number 10 spot.
I honestly didn't even consider Luka. I didn't even think about him, but he is a good honorable mention. I don't know. I was just thinking about like these all-time guards, and I just feel like Luka's got more to tap into before, like, I don't know. I feel like we haven't seen the best version of Luka offensively yet. I still feel like there's more that he can do.
I wonder if you're holding this past year against him a little too much. Because 2023 and 2024, Luka, 33, 9, and 9 on plus 3.5%.
He still wouldn't have made my list, but I think he'd be him and Harden would be battling for that last spot. I think it's the right spot to have him in.
Yeah, I just think like he's pretty clearly a level above Dame as an offensive engine. It's truly ridiculous. Like 2023 Luka, once he really put together that like really impressive post-up game, there was a level of scoring mastery there, and he was still so damn effective as a driver and getting to the line at a ridiculous rate, more than 10 times a game. And then the next year is when he really peaks as a pull-up shooter. Yeah, well, the driving game, absolutely. But when he's knocking down 38% of more than 10 threes a game and is still shooting 57% on twos in 2024, while he's averaging 10 assists a game, like, he's got to be in that top 12 somewhere. I do firmly believe that, but I do prefer Nash as an offensive engine. It's extremely close, though. I have no problem with anybody if they have Luka in the 10 spot instead. Who is in your number 9 spot, Logan?
I've got your boy Chris Paul in the 9 spot, and I wasn't really debating if I was going to have Chris Paul. It was kind of what version of Chris Paul I would rather have. I think there is an argument to be made that you would prefer Clippers Chris Paul, just with his mastery of the game, his decision-making, how efficient he was, protecting the basketball. I think it's a better shooting version of Chris Paul. And I mean, he's leading out a top 2 offense basically every single season with Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan. That being said, I did go with young Chris Paul, specifically 2008 to 2010. I think Chris's speed and quickness and ability to turn the corner on guys is the reason I went with him. I just think there's a different level of downhill pressure that I get with a young version of Chris Paul. But like I said, I would understand if you go with a more veteran, control the game kind of floor general version of CP. But this version of Chris Paul is just nasty, man. I mean, what he could do in the middle of the floor, kill you in every, area. It's really beautiful to watch, like how patient he is waiting for stuff to open up, using his change of pace and his deception to open up angles. But it really is him blazing past guys. When you've been watching a guy for so long, like you can kind of get, you think of Chris Paul right now, the first thing I think of is an elbow pull-up. But you think of young Chris Paul, and it is bending the corner on a big man and just getting to the rim. That version of Chris Paul is special. And so I went with this guy. I also think that this is where I really started valuing two-way ability. Like Chris Paul is an actual good defensive guard. Steve Nash, Harden, Luka. They're not all zeros, but they're way less impactful than a guy like Chris Paul, who was averaging consistently over 2 steals a game. Like I said, could kill you all over the floor. He's given you 21, 5, and 11 on 50, 38, 86 splits during this run, and he's pretty damn efficient at protecting the basketball. Same thing that I said about Nash, I still feel like is the same with Chris Paul, too, dude. I really wonder. Same thing I said about Harden. How differently do we view this guy if he ends up getting a ring with those Clippers teams or if he ends up getting the job done? Because I think at his apex, even I've underrated Chris Paul in the past, but special, great decision maker. And another difference, again, too, that I want to emphasize when we're talking about the Lukas and Hardens of the world, because their raw numbers will blow you away. It really is the selflessness and the decision making and the ability to fit in. When you think of guys like Chris Paul and Steve Nash, obviously they always have the ball in their hands because they're the point guards and the best decision makers and elite passers, but there is a different level of ability to, and this is a small example, but like run a pick and roll, kick the ball to the corner, and then relocate back out to the wing and take a 3 or something like that. It's like, it's not something that like Luka and Harden can't do, but it's like they would much rather dribble the ball for 15 seconds, get shifty, and then find their pull-up shot. I feel like Paul and Nash are more conducive to better team offenses and fitting in and striking that correct balance between scoring and playmaking to best find the success of an offense. So, again, I don't think the raw numbers with either of those guys are going to blow you away, but I do think their impact succeeds what their raw numbers will tell you. So I've got 08 to 10 Chris Paul here in my 9 spot.
I have Chris Paul in my 9 spot, but I did end up going with 2014 to 2016 Clippers Chris Paul, and I've gone back and forth over which peak I prefer. I did land on this one, even though he was the better athlete in that 2008 to 2010 range and was like a underratedly freaky explosive athlete at that time. I just think there's a pretty significant improvement as a three-point shooter and as an overall jump shooter that I prefer when you get the Clippers version. I do think that he was the slightly better overall defensive player because he had a bit of a stronger frame and just his defensive IQ had gotten even higher by this point. So I'm going to go with this version of CP3, but you can't go wrong. And he's incredible, man. I mean, he is such an underrated offensive and overall basketball genius. In this 3-year stretch, averaged 19, 4, and 10 on plus 5% relative true shooting with just 2.4 turnovers per game. He also let out back-to-back number one offenses. Like, this is another team that gets overshadowed. Those Clippers teams had some historic offenses, and it was Chris Paul who was driving it, who was the best, most important player. And the impact numbers reflect that. Like, this is another thing. Luka and Harden, they are these incredible offensive players, right? And I don't want to make this a thing where we're ragging on them. I mean, we are absolutely nitpicking here. That is the definition of nitpicking, what we're doing right now. But in terms of being completely transformative statistically for their team's offense, they actually are surpassed by guys like Nash, who again had plus 12 on-off differential in these years, whereas Luka, Harden were never reaching those heights. Chris Paul throughout his career is literally one of the impact metric on-off GOATs. Like, over these 3 seasons, he has a plus 15 on-off swing, and all time. Well, this is since 1997 when the stat began being tracked, but he is up there in a club with only like Steph Curry, LeBron James, Nikola Jokic, Kevin Garnett. Dirk is up there very high, and then it's Chris Paul. And he's also, of course, the epitome of the guy who can walk into any situation and immediately transform that team and make them way, way better. And the reason for that is that this guy probably had the most well-rounded point guard peak in NBA history. And you mentioned that balance of scoring and playmaking. I do think that's something that he really nailed. I think it's something that Nash nailed even more so. And I do think that Nash is definitely the better offensive player than Chris Paul by a decent bit, honestly. But it is Chris Paul being able to bring so much of that brilliant offensive value while also being a strong plus defensively that puts him a little bit higher than Nash, because Nash was the greatest pick and roll player ever. Chris Paul is top 3 pick and roll player of all time. I mean, just ridiculous. Every one of these years, he's better than 90th percentile pick and roll efficiency on massive volume. And he was just in such complete control. Every possession, literally never sped up. He did have high-end quickness still at this point. Not quite what it was with the Hornets, but still very quick guard, an immaculate ball handler. And he didn't have the audacity of Nash. And that's why Nash is the better playmaker. Again, Nash is probably the best we've ever seen at creating those incredibly high-value assists for his teammates. And he was so audacious, and he was so great at manipulating defenses. He was going to try stuff that Chris Paul wouldn't. And more often than not, that paid off for Nash. But what I think Chris Paul did, and this is something I talk about with Tyrese Halliburton a lot, is those are the 2 best we've ever seen in the history of this game, Paul and Halliburton, at minimizing risk while still generating really high quality chances for their teammates at a really high volume. Chris Paul is not going to try and make some of the passes that Steve Nash or Magic Johnson will. And so those guys surpass him as passers. But Chris Paul is going to give you a lot of really high value assists for his teammates. He's going to give you a lot of that value while taking such exceptional care of the basketball, which is so valuable. So he is an all-time playmaker to me, not like top 3, top 5, but top 10, I would say. And then his scoring is also underrated, because this just always happens with guys who don't go out there and try to score 25, 27 points per game. But he was incredibly efficient. He's one of the greatest jump shooters we've ever seen. 47% from mid-range, 50% inside the paint, outside the restricted area, those short jumpers and floaters. One of the greatest intermediate shot makers we've ever seen. I mean, just had complete control of the elbows, got whatever he wanted there, and he had grown to be a 38% three-point shooter at this time. He was also, like Nash, a legitimate monster in isolation, and we saw this all the way through the Houston years and even into the Phoenix years, where he could just destroy bigs out in space with his ball handling, with his shiftiness, and with that mid-range shot making. If he can create just a couple of feet of space, and if he can get you on your back foot, he's going to rise up and fire, and he's just about as good as any guard we've ever seen from that range. So he's bringing you this incredible offensive mastery, leading all-time offenses as the engine, while being a legit plus defender. He is the best 6-foot defensive guard we've ever seen. He was a really high-level point of attack defender. He had elite defensive IQ. He had good strength, and he had phenomenal hands. This is a guy who led the league in steals, 6 times? I mean, his ability to create those plays defensively, which could then turn into offense, was extremely valuable. And also, he's fighting some of these same myths that he was somebody who didn't excel in the playoffs. Just because his team didn't win a ring does not mean that is true. In fact, Chris Paul is a playoff riser. Chris Paul is one of the extremely rare players in NBA history who could increase his scoring volume and efficiency in the playoffs. He averaged 21, 4, and 9 on almost plus 7% relative true shooting across these 3 postseasons, which is just incredible. And I think it really is the impact numbers that speak to his all-around brilliance that maybe isn't fully captured in the box score. One area where I will say Nash sets himself apart from Chris Paul offensively, it's not just the audacity as a playmaker. It's not just Nash being even greater as a jump shooter, even more efficient as a scorer. It is also the transition aspect, because although these Clippers teams did like to play with pace more so than any other team in Chris Paul's career, really, he did like to strangle the pace more than a Nash. He was a very methodical, deliberate half-court player, and there's good aspects to that. You feel like he's in control of every possession. He's basically never going to turn the ball over. He's always going to get a good shot up. But again, there are some big advantages to being super aggressive in transition and semi-transition and getting those easy points that Chris Paul was not one of the best we've ever seen at. So Nash, definitely better offensively, but Chris Paul is an amazing offensive player, a top 20 offensive player we've ever seen, while also being this legit plus defender. I just think when you're looking at a Nash and a Luka and a Harden, all these guys are so damn close. But all 3 of those other guys, like, they have their flaw that you're trying to work around. Okay, we have to cover up for them on the defensive end, and maybe we have to put a specific kind of offensive personnel around Luka and Harden and guys who can accommodate their play style and their extreme ball dominance and the pace they want to play at. Chris Paul works with everybody ever. I mean, yeah, he's ball dominant, but he is so selfless as a playmaker. He brings positive value in so many different areas. I just think it's probably easiest to win with him as your lead guard.
It's fascinating. I mean, I'm not shocked that you went with the older version, but I am a little surprised. I respect it, though. I do think the 3-point difference is reasonable. And
yeah,
that version of Chris just had such phenomenal feel. I mean, every version of Chris Paul has always had good feel, but at that stage, that was like the master, going to work. Like, I get it. I'm surprised, though, man. Young Chris Paul is fun to watch, dude. Maybe I got nostalgia for that, too, though. I mean, the shiftiness, the quickness, the bend.
Yeah, it's incredible.
He had crazy pop. The next guy in my next spot has got maybe one of the highest athletic peaks, I think, of all time, man. I mean, he is a freak. And you tell me if I'm off base, Carson.
Okay.
I've got, let me see what years exactly. I think 2007 to 2009, Dwyane Wade are the years I went with. Yeah. Am I crazy for saying I see like a blend of modern-day Ant and SGA when I watch old D. Wade?
No, I don't think you're crazy for saying that. I mean, I see where you're coming from.
I mean, it's the ridiculous athlete, crazy first step, great verticality, incredibly shifty with a good handle, splitting double teams and pick and roll, getting downhill. But I mean, he's an insane interior arc operator. I would say one of the best of all time, like just navigating lanes. It's crazy. I kind of like we're talking about with Chris Paul, or what I was talking about with Chris Paul, you get this image of him as he gets older in your head. I think it's the same thing with D Wade. You remember the D Wade post shoulder injury, post knee injury, and some of this actually was after those injuries and surgeries. But, you know, like banged up Heatles Wade, where he's taking a backseat to LeBron. Granted, he's still very, very good. But because that's when he won the most, that might be the first D Wade that you think about. When his apex was in the late 2000s, where he's a really good ball handler, insane at getting downhill. And he's also an underrated, I think, playmaker, too, with his ability to get to the rim. The thing that really puts Wade over the top to me than some of these other guards, because I think I could hear arguments that, you know, Paul or Nash leads to better offensive results. One, I think Wade is in a different tier as a transition scorer and as a defender. I think you're just getting incredible value in comparison to those guys, where he's a legitimate defensive plus and great defensive playmaker. Over this 3-year run, he's given you 2 steals and over a block a game, and one of the best transition scorers, I think, in basketball. But really what puts him over the top is how great he was as an off-ball scorer, curling around screens and getting into pull-up jumpers, cutting off ball, getting to the rim. And he is just a different athlete. I mean, this version of Wade to me is absolutely insane. The combination of first step, of verticality, of agility, of coordination, body control. I don't think he's absolute apex Ant level of athlete, and I don't think he's absolute apex level of SGA's slitheriness. But I think you're getting like 95% of both of those guys. And that combination is ridiculous. I do think in comparison, I think he's got a better handle than a guy like where Ant's at right now. I don't think he's like the only knock that I think you could have on this version of Wade, in my opinion, are the turnover numbers and the three-point efficiency, because he wasn't a great three-point shooter. That was never D-Wade's bread and butter. But one of the best scorers inside the arc, a freakish athlete, an underrated playmaker with an underrated handle, and a defensive problem. I don't think I could go any higher than this for Wade, but good God, what a damn good player he was.
He's unbelievable. And you're talking about sort of the Ant-Shai hybrid, and I do see where you're coming from with that, because he does have that combination of just like unbelievable, unstoppable first step, but he also has the elite ball handling and the change in pace and the incredible flexibility and body control and the shiftiness, his ability to navigate those super packed paints with incredible skill and deftness, which makes you think of SGA. And he's not at that level in terms of the sheer craft and the slitheriness, but there's elements of that. In terms of raw athleticism, though, I think I probably take peak D Wade over Anthony Edwards. Like, Ant has the strength aspect, but in terms of explosiveness, D Wade clears.
I don't know, man. Ant's one of the greatest athletes I've ever seen.
D Wade's one of the greatest athletes I've ever seen, man. I mean, D Wade is harder to stay in front of.
I would
Ant.
say
I don't even think I
would say D Wade's
that close.
I think D Wade's first step is better. That's the only edge I'd give him.
His first step is definitely better. In terms of overall flexibility, agility, balance, things like that, which I think are part of athleticism, I think that D Wade is better. Vertically around the rim, I think it's super close. And then I do think that Ant is stronger, but D Wade was also strong. And what's really the significant difference, and one of D Wade's all-time great strengths, is his relentlessness getting to the rim. This is something that we talk about with Ant sometimes, where it's great that he can shoot the pull-up three like he can, but he can fall in love with it. And he's not somebody who gets to the line 8-10 times a game. He's not somebody who gets to the rim at like an all-time rate. D Wade is kind of the epitome of the guard who is just going to manufacture rim opportunity after rim opportunity for himself. It's ridiculous. So I went with 2009 and 2010 as Wade's peak. I think this is when you had the most realized all-around version of him. 2009 is just an incredible season, one of the best ever to not be rewarded with an MVP. And I think this is when he also peaks as a playmaker. I think that this is when you get the most efficient version of Wade. The numbers are ridiculous. I mean, 28.5 points, 5 rebounds, 7 assists a game with 2 steals and 1.2 blocks on plus 2.5% relative true shooting. That raw efficiency number doesn't wow you. It's good, not great, but you have to understand the offensive load he had at this time, the role that he was having to take on, because his on-ball efficiency is incredible. I mean, he was like 85th percentile pick and roll efficiency, 90th percentile isolation efficiency, and it all starts with that all-time great ability to get to the rim. This guy was taking 7.5 shots per game in the restricted area, Logan, and he was making 67% of them. He was also eating up 9.5 free throw attempts per game. So even in this super congested era for everybody in the NBA, but especially for him playing on some Heat teams that just were not talented and were ugly offensively, if you take him out of the picture, he's got that special ability to still navigate his way to the basket, which is incredible. And he was skilled enough as a shot maker to have a legitimate counter when you loaded up super aggressively, when you played off of him. Shot 46% inside the paint, outside the restricted area, which is a good number. 39% from mid-range, which is solid. It's not a elite number, certainly, but you have to understand, objective number one for D-Wade was get to the rim, and he took the mid-range shot when it was given to him, and it was important that he was at least solid from that range. But another aspect of his game that I think you touched on that is underrated, he was a really good playmaker at this stage in his career. Like, obviously, the elite rim pressure opened up some reads for him that are pretty easy just because he's collapsing the defense, but it goes way beyond that. I mean, he had legitimately great feel out of pick and roll. He had a really good sense of timing and placement of pocket passes and finding the roll man. He had underrated deception as a passer. He had good anticipation. He could make skip passes. He could punish doubles. Like, he was a really nice passer. I think there are times where he could be in a score first mode, and obviously he's not like among some of the passers we've already talked about, but as a true shooting guard, he's one of the best passers at the position that we've ever seen. And you mentioned, yes, the turnover numbers, they're still a little high, but at this point in his career, he had cut down on them because early in his career, there are years where he's averaging 4.5 turnovers a game. He's in the low threes at this point in 2009, 2010. So more efficient in that way as well. And it's just an incredible offensive floor raising job that he did. He improved Miami's offense by 15 points per 100 possessions over these couple years. He's taken old Jermaine O'Neal and Michael Beasley and the boys to average 45 wins. He's got an overall on-off differential of plus 14 in this 2-year span. And as you mentioned, he's a great transition scorer. He does have really good cutting feel, which I think you saw more of in 2011, which you could argue is still part of this peak if you wanted to extend it to 3 years, because he was still incredible in that run. He was incredible in the playoffs too. It's Braun who let the team down. But you didn't see as much of the cutting in 2009 and 2010 just because he had to carry such an incredible on-ball load because of the lack of talent around him. But he could scale. He could adjust to playing with a guy like LeBron. We did see that. And he's one of the better defensive guards we've ever seen. Like, again, over 3 stocks a game at this time. He's a top 2 shot blocking guard we've ever seen, only to Michael Jordan. He had elite quickness. He was physical on ball, and of course had that value as a rim protector that is unique for the position. Legitimately an all defense caliber guard. And even though it's a small sample size over these 2 years, he did ball out in the playoffs. 31, 5, and 6 on plus 5.5% relative true shooting. Tore up a great Celtics defense. And I mean, we know that the sample goes beyond this. Like, he was great in the 2011 playoffs. Obviously, this is before he peaked, in my opinion, but 2006, one of the great finals performances we've ever seen. 2005, year 2, D-Wade was dominant in that playoff run. So I think his athleticism, his ability to will his way to the rim, always translated in those physical playoff environments. He was still somebody who you couldn't keep from getting where he wanted. He was just a straight up monster, and I really don't have a knock on him. Like, it's basically just everybody above him was even more transformative offensively, because Wade, great offensive player, but there are guys who just had even greater superpowers, hyper efficiency as scorers, all-time playmaking. Like, that's the only thing that keeps Wade at number 8, but it's an incredible, incredible peak.
Yeah, well said. I think one of those guys that brings you more offensive value unequivocally in my 7th spot is Oscar Robertson. I've got the 63-65 version of Oscar here, and he let out the number 1 offense all 3 of those seasons. Now, I think everybody that knows Oscar knows that he filled up the stat sheet. In the regular season, he's given you 30, 10, and 11 on 57.5% true shooting. Very, very high for this era. 30, 10, and 9 in the playoffs on 56.5% true shooting. Oscar was really ahead of his time. Great at getting to the rim. And his size, especially in this era, helped him be a great finisher. You know, he had really good touch too, but guys just couldn't get up there and block his shot. I mean, he's so much bigger than everybody else, and he was good at using his body to get to the rim as well. But I think you see it in his dribble too. He's got a nice little hesitation dribble that he uses. But my favorite thing about watching Oscar of this time is really his playmaking and passing. I think Oscar is one of the greatest passers of all time. And when we're talking about doing ahead of his time stuff, really the outlet passing is what blows me away, man. Like the accuracy, the velocity that he's throwing these passes with, and just the vision. Like, it's stuff that, you know, maybe we take for granted nowadays, but, you know, Tyrese Halliburton, Jokic, they do it every game. Oscar's got just incredible passing vision.
They don't want you to know outlet passing peaked in the 60s and 70s. I guarantee you, you watch basketball, I mean, the pace was so fast, it was such a priority.
Let me ask you this.
It's the bigs, man. They're throwing fucking touchdown passes, football passes.
Do you think that was more because of the defense, how the defense is playing, or because of the pace?
It's because of the pace. It's because the pace was so ridiculously fast. I mean, when you're trying to push every single possession, you're going to be aggressive, and they miss sometimes too. But I talked about this when I watched the NBA game from every decade, and I did that whole YouTube video. I mean, you're just going to see a number of money ones, and a lot of bigs are capable of slinging them. Obviously, Wes Unseld is the guy who everybody thinks of as the GOAT, and I do think Jokic has surpassed him just because he's the best passing center ever in basically every way. But it's a pretty fun aspect of the old game.
I mean, this is the most fun I had watching Oscar just because he's point and shoot. He's picking his spot out, and he's just hurling that thing down court. It's an easy way to get buckets. And it really is the complete value that Oscar's giving you. It's the fact that he's one of the best offensive engines ever, that he was leading the best offense in basketball out every single season. It's the fact that he's one of the best scorers in basketball at this point, one of the best playmakers, and one of the best rebounders. And he's a really good on-ball defender as well, really good hands. Again, they don't have tracking numbers back then. I think there are some guards. Let me see. I'm going to say some guards. There's one guard I think that definitely surpasses him defensively of his era, like Jerry West, I think is definitely above him, but Oscar's still a good defender. So it really is the complete value. You know, you were talking about Wade not bringing you, you know, the elite stuff as an offensive engine. I really do think you get that with Oscar, and could just do everything. Really ahead of his time. I couldn't have him any higher, though. I'm pretty happy with the 6 guys that I have above Oscar.
I have Oscar one spot higher, and I really debated him and the guy in the 7 spot. I just think the offensive value is too great from Oscar. I mean, this is another guy who I'm talking about, Nash having one of those highest offensive peaks ever that can get underrated by some. Oscar also, we're talking about probably a top 8 peak in basketball history, and I say this a million times, but there's 3 dudes who led runs of team offense where they are just cranking out number 1 units year after year after year.
What are they doing?
It's Nash in the 2000s. You heard me, Logan. It's Magic in the 80s, and it's Oscar in the 60s. And specifically, I'll go with 1963 and 1966 as his peak. So basically the same as you. But the numbers are truly ridiculous. To average 39 and 11 on plus 9% relative true shooting. He's another guy on that Mount Rushmore of guard efficiency. Just incredible. And in the playoffs, to give you 30, 10, and 9 on plus 7% true shooting. Leading 3 number 1 offenses in this time. He's the best offensive player of the 60s. People can look at Wilt's raw volume, but especially if you're talking about 1962 when he averaged 50 and his early years with the Warriors, like Wilt just was not nearly as impactful an offensive player as Oscar because Wilt had not properly struck that balance between scoring and playmaking. In fact, he wasn't even close. He had probably the biggest scoring blindness we've ever seen from a player in NBA history at that time. He's averaging 50 points and 2 assists, so he's not amplifying his teammates. Oscar is one of those rare guys throughout league history who simultaneously can make the case for being the best scorer and the best passer alive. And he was the best passer, and he was the best overall offensive engine, and he's one of the best offensive engines ever. Dominant rim pressurer, downhill guard, elite athlete for the time with great size as that big point guard, legit 6'5", historic free throw rate, getting to the line 12 times a game some years, and he could bully you physically with his back to the basket. He's a great mid-range shot maker, could shoot over top of you with fadeaways. Just, again, an all-time efficient guard, a really incredibly well-rounded scoring guard, and an elite playmaker with great size, with great vision. Kind of like the first offense to really implement pick and roll was Oscar with the Royals in the 60s, so ahead of his time in that sense, and extremely impactful. Like if we expand the sample size here to all of his years with the Royals, they won 54% of their games when he played, which isn't going to wow you as a number because their defenses always sucked, but their offenses were always amazing when he was on the floor. But they only won 24% of their games without him. I mean, they were a dumpster fire without him. He inherited a dumpster fire, and he made them a dominant offense, which is really all you could ask of him. I will say it is his lack of defensive impact that keeps him here. I would not say Oscar was a good defender. I would say Oscar was a fine defender, passable defender, but there are guys who either surpass him in terms of that two-way value or are just like in the Steph Magic offensive engine tier, which is even a little bit greater than Oscar. And that's why I have him in my 6th spot, but I do have him just by a hair above my beloved SGA Logan. And this is a really tough one. This is really close. I think at this point, Shai has not quite shown a postseason run with the level of offensive polish to put him past Oscar.
You don't think the defensive difference makes up for it?
Not quite, man. Not quite, because like literally you have to think about the numbers Oscar's putting up. It's a 30-point triple-double, leading the best offense in basketball with some of the most efficient production we've ever seen from a guard.
We're only off by one spot here, and maybe I hit Oscar with the hashtag air attacks. I don't know, man.
It's really close, but I think you have to understand, like, Shai absolutely has the potential to not just surpass Oscar. Shai has the potential to shoot in the top 4 of this list. Like, pretty easily that potential is there because this regular season, I think he was at that level, and he was still great in the playoffs. If you look at these last 2 years, regular season, he's 31.5 points, 6 assists on plus 6% relative true shooting with crazy low turnover numbers, the lowest we've ever seen from a 30-point per game scorer. That's incredible. In the playoffs, he's still giving you 36, 6.5. He has an incredible load on him. He has, frankly, a suboptimal offensive situation around him, like a team that has
put a pause on this
shooting.
whole episode, bro.
Why?
Some of the stuff, man.
What did I say?
I hope they clip this and take this mad out of context.
I said something about a load? I'm just talking ball here, man. I'm just talking balls here, man. But you do understand, like, they have prioritized a defensive roster around him, understanding that he can clean up so much for them offensively, and that with his really unique isolation and pick and roll on-ball scoring, he can bend the entire defense to fixate on him, and he can still be very efficient as a scorer, and he can be extremely impactful as a playmaker without having to make the most advanced, brilliant reads that a Luka Doncic is making in the NBA today. And still, Shai can be on that level as an offensive engine because, as a scorer, he's the best downhill guard in basketball. He's got totally unique change in pace. Overall, this incredible blend of balance, of his ability to vary his stride length, just his overall body control in the paint, navigating through spins. His footwork is absolutely masterful. And then he's this ridiculous, graceful finisher with a 7-foot wingspan around the rim. Can't keep him away from the basket. Can't keep him off the line. And if you somehow can, he's the best mid-range shot-making guard in basketball who shoots like 50% from the mid-range, 50% in the paint outside the restricted area, has an incredible deep bag of counters, and is an underrated post-scoring guard as well. I mean, he truly has everything in his arsenal. And then in the regular season, this guy was also shooting 37% from deep on like 6 attempts a game, at which point he has everything in his bag. And I've called him the most complete on-ball scoring guard ever. The thing is, even though he is this all-time offensive engine, he's improved OKC's offense by 10 points in terms of offensive rating to a 123 offensive rating when he's on the court, which is a great number when you consider the supporting cast that he's playing with. I do think in the playoffs, we've just seen a little bit more inconsistency with him in terms of at times being really score first, missing some playmaking opportunities. The consistency of the pull-up three in this run was not what it was in the regular season and was not what it would need to be for Shai to reach his absolute ceiling. And so you end up with average efficiency in the playoffs over these last couple years compared to elite efficiency in the regular season. Truly, that's where I give Oscar the edge. Oscar was one of the 8 greatest offensive players we've ever seen in the regular season and the playoffs. Shai, I would say, is probably a top 15-ish offensive player ever in the regular season. And in the playoffs, still phenomenal, but just a little bit of a level below where he's been at in the regular season. So the defensive impact, yes, I think that Shai is a plus there. He's not an elite defensive player, though. Like, if he were an elite defensive player, then I would have him above Oscar. He does his good stuff. He's a uniquely good rim protecting guard because he has wing size and like really good wing length, obviously. And he's got great instincts in terms of making plays on the ball. And he's got great hands. And the guy's averaged close to 3 stocks per game over the last 2 years. So if it all comes together next year in the playoffs with the pull-up three-point shooting, with the really consistent high-level playmaking, because there were some great, great games from him as a playmaker in these playoffs, but there were also some bad ones, then I think he can climb up past Oscar, past the couple guys who are above him on this list right now. I just want to see that one playoff run that's a little bit more polished, a little bit more flawless end to end, and he'll be there. The bar is extremely high. I mean, I think I've made my opinion on Shai very clear. I'm extremely high on him in all-time conversations, and I think having him at number 7 maintains that. It's just, the bar is ridiculous. Oscar is doing absolutely ridiculous stuff. Everybody in this range of the list is doing absolutely ridiculous stuff. And so I am going to settle on him here for now.
I do think you're being a little bit overly critical of SGA. I mean, like, I don't necessarily disagree with a lot of the points that you're making, but I still think he was great at protecting the basketball.
I agree.
Has been great at protecting the basketball. I do think his defensive value surpasses Oscar. And I mean, I just don't think SGA is in that great of an offensive situation and is kind of overcoming it. Like, I don't know.
I don't think I'm being overly critical. I'm just giving Oscar Robertson his respect. I mean, did you hear the numbers? The resume for Oscar is absolutely
I got him down too.
ridiculous.
Like, I see him. I don't know. Maybe I'm hitting Oscar with the air attacks. I just couldn't mentally do it. I couldn't do it, man.
Oscar with the air attacks. I think you have to be hitting Oscar with the air attacks. If you can't see it, I think you're hitting him with the air attacks.
SGA is one of the best scorers I've ever seen.
He absolutely is. And Oscar is a better offensive player. So what's not computing there?
Give me SGA.
You don't think that's true?
Give me SGA. I think Oscar's the slightly better offensive player, but it's close, man.
It is close, and it's as close as can be between these two. Like, coming in, I didn't know who I was going to land on. I don't think it's unreasonable to say, let's see another year. Let's see Shai.
I just think SGA already did
even better. I don't know, man. The bar is extremely high, and he's right there, and I have no problem with you taking Shai, but I do have a problem with you acting like Oscar doesn't have a really strong case.
Did Oscar ever get to the conference championship with the Royals?
He did.
He did.
Yeah, and he led the best offense every single year, bro. It's not his fault they put a bunch of defensive bums around him. He's a guard. He can only impact the game defensively so much. That's just the reality. It was an unfortunate situation. Bro, they won 24% of their games without him. They were the worst team in the league without him. Like, that's where I think Oscar's a victim of circumstance. This is a guy who, considering his talent, got one of the worst hands dealt in terms of surrounding situation ever for most of his career, and then ultimately obviously goes to the Bucks, wins a title, but is not the same player at that point that he was in his prime. Let's get into the top 5, Logan. Who's in your 5th spot?
Kobe.
Wow, okay. Let's hear it.
06 to 08. I consider Kobe, honestly, I did debate SGA Kobe for a minute, and then I went, all right, I'm bugging. I'm going to go with Kobe.
I mean, I don't think you're bugging. I think this entire 4 through 7 range is pretty close. Honestly, bro, there's so many great guards. I think there's a lot of ways you could argue a lot of these dudes.
Yeah, and I consider Kobe up to number 4. I just do have a crazy amount of respect for the guy in my number 4 spot. So I did stick Kobe with 5. You're talking about victim of circumstance. It really is hard to judge prime Kobe Bryant because of the rosters around him in this era. I went with 06 to 08. Kobe's giving you 32, 6, and 5 on 57.1% true shooting with basically 1.5 steals per game. And he actually got more efficient in the playoffs. His points dropped by 2, so he drops to 30 points per game, but he's even more efficient. But it is tough, man, because it's like we all know Kobe's mentality, man. He was, I'm going to take the ball, I'm going to shoot it. And his teams of this era were not that good. And so I think it's really impressive. The reason that I went with Kobe up here is that he could score the ball this efficiently, this effectively in this era of grimy ass, slowed down basketball. Like, it is nasty, defensive minded, clunky. You're scoring like 90 points a game, normally tops. And Kobe's still managing to give you 30 a night. Again, in one of the toughest eras, I think, to ever score the basketball. And I think a real misconception is that Kobe couldn't pass. Kobe really could pass, especially young Kobe, too, when those teams were better. I always wonder what this version of Kobe would have looked like if he had had a better supporting cast, one that he trusted a little bit more. I think you see how much better the team got finally when they make the trade for Pau Gasol, when they get competitive, but I don't think that's the best version of Kobe. I think this version of Kobe is the perfect blend of young, athletic Kobe with the early title teams, with nasty, tough, elite shot-making Kobe that you get from the NBA Finals runs with the second iteration with Gasol and Bynum. And you're still getting a very good defensive player. So one of the best scorers, I think, in NBA history. A really, really good defender. I think sometimes can get a little bit overrated, but still a great defender and an underrated playmaker, I think. So Kobe's polarizing. He was one of the tougher guys to rank on this list. Ultimately, damn, I think he's got the third highest two-way peak of my top 5, but I think there's a couple of guys that just succeed him in ability as offensive engines, and there's a couple of guys that just surpass him in terms of two-way ability.
I have Kobe at number 4. I went with the same years, 06 to 08, and it's just incredible. I mean, the raw scoring production over those years, 32 a game, 32, 6, and 5 are his overall averages on plus 3.5% relative true shooting. I do think that Kobe is so interesting and at times so tough to talk about because a vast majority of people, in my opinion, are kind of too extreme on Kobe in a positive direction or too extreme on him in a negative direction. But the people who are too extreme in a negative direction, I think, really do underrate that his efficiency, considering his role, his shot diet, is actually really impressive at this point in his career. Like, no, it is not among the all-time greats, but he's hovering around like 90th percentile isolation efficiency on ridiculous volume, 80th percentile pick and roll and post-up efficiency. Like, the all-around on-ball scoring burden that he had was massive, and he was able to still produce efficiently with a lot of difficult shot making. Like, he is the greatest difficult shot maker we've ever seen, and obviously, no matter how good you are as a tough shot maker, that's not going to be as efficient as if you can manufacture those high value opportunities around the rim. But it is such an important counter. It's something nobody can ever take away. It's a reason that Kobe did scale so well in the playoffs and was so resilient as a scorer and arguably got even better because he could rely on the same difficult shots that were available to him throughout the regular season. They're still there in the playoffs. There's no packing the paint to take that stuff away. And he's just incredible to watch. Obviously, this is a huge reason why so many people are so in love with Kobe's game. The footwork, the balance, the artistry is just incredible. Good physicality, and was really damn good as a shot maker. Like, if you look at the numbers, about 50% in the paint outside the restricted area. That's a great number. 42% for mid-range is a really good number. Also got to the line at an elite rate, like 10 times a game. In this era, I think that can kind of be overrated, how productive he was as a foul drawer. And also, even though this is a time where he had such a burden on ball, he's an all-time off-ball scorer. Like, he was active off-ball. He was a smart cutter. He was a really good catch and shooter. He was really good playing off screens, coming off a pin down. Like, he was a very complete, versatile scorer. Really one of the most we've ever seen. Also, had grown into a volume 35% three-point shooter at this point. That's a big difference between Kobe in the late 2000s and Kobe in the early 2000s, which was his athletic peak, was his defensive peak, but the three-point shot was not the weapon that it would become for him in this 06 to 08 range. And although he had his limitations as a playmaker, and he definitely did, right? Lack of high-end vision, he could definitely get scoring blindness, he could definitely force tough shots, and he didn't pressure the rim at that elite rate to open up a lot of those easy lay down, kick out passes that come just as a product of collapsing the defense when you're getting to the rim. But he was a pretty skilled passer, and he did still demand a ton of defensive attention from everywhere on the floor, right? Like, Kobe is drawing a bunch of doubles on the elbows. You are worried about him scoring from anywhere at any moment. And it's that kind of unconventional gravity and defensive attention he demands that I think can also get underrated by people who are too low on Kobe, in my opinion. So that offensive versatility is pretty awesome. He was quite impactful at this point, plus 8.6 on off splits over those 3 years. It's a really good offensive floor raising job, especially in 06 and 07, before they get Powell, still leading those groups to be like top 8 offenses. That was really impressive, but he also scaled quite well onto more talented rosters. Like, once you get 2009, 2010, and you have these incredibly talented teams, like, Kobe could dial back his scoring volume a bit. Obviously, he was always a volume scorer, but he wasn't like, okay, I have to try to score 36 a game every time. He could do more off ball. And so I really love Kobe's offense in a lot of ways. I do think his defense is overrated pretty badly by some people, especially in the 06 and 07 range. He basically completely took his foot off the gas defensively for a few years. And you can say, like, understandably so, because the teams weren't that good and he had such an offensive load. But the guy is still getting first team all defense awards when I would say he is at best a neutral defensively and probably a negative in a couple of these regular seasons. That's where the reputation accolades can be so bad. And if you ever bring up Kobe's all defense accolades when we're talking basketball, like, I just discount that, because accolades are just other people's attempts to measure what's going on. I can actually watch myself and make a determination. Sometimes other people get stuff totally wrong. This is as clear an instance of that as there is with any accolade stuff in NBA history. And even when you get to like 08, I would say Kobe is still just a plus defender. He's not like all defense caliber. He was that in the early 2000s. He isn't that in the late 2000s, but he was a good on-ball defender, good size, really good length, 6'11" wingspan. He just had a lot of lapses in focus, wasn't very impactful as a help defender, as like a kind of wing rim protector. He wasn't doing, obviously, what a D Wade is doing in terms of some deterrence and shot blocking there. So he's just like a solid, slight plus on the defensive side. So overall, I do prefer the guys who are like GOAT level offensive engines and are just passable defenders, because Kobe's defensive value at this stage is just a slight positive for me. It's not like he is an elite defensive player, which maybe you could make the argument if he were, he could be higher on this list. I do think, as I mentioned, there are people who are way too low on Kobe, which I feel like I've also talked about. There's also people who are just too high on Kobe. And I saw a take from our buddy Jason Timp the other day who said it is flat out insulting to have Kobe at number 11 all time, which is where Bleacher Report had him. And I didn't like that take. I actually think it's pretty insulting to all of the other all-time great players who are in that top 12 kind of range to act like that's not justifiable. Like, I think there are a number of dudes who are major victims of era bias. I think Bill Russell is the first guy who comes to mind, right? People just not understanding his value and how uniquely capable he was of being the engine of the greatest dynasty in sports history, just by being by so far the greatest defensive player we've ever seen, right? Like, if you want to have Kobe up a few spots higher, that's fine. But if you are saying, oh, how could you possibly have these other guys above him? Then I think you're disrespecting those other guys. And specifically, when I'm looking at a couple guys who are in my top 3 on this guard list, like, I prefer Magic and Steph because they are simply significantly greater offensive engines. Kobe was a great offensive engine. Those are dudes who could single-handedly engineer all-time offenses in their unique ways. Steph, with his literal GOAT level efficiency for a guard, with his greatest three-point shooting we've ever seen, his greatest off-ball gravity ever, an ability to bend and stress defenses in a way we've never seen, which makes him the greatest offensive ceiling raiser ever. Magic with his literal GOAT playmaking, his ridiculous efficiency, his ridiculous GOAT-level transition offense. Like, Kobe was amazing, but Steph and Magic both had A++++ GOAT-level traits that made them different levels of offensive engines. And that's the case for most of like the top tier guys. If you look at Shaq, right, it is just that unrivaled rim pressure physical dominance. If you look at LeBron and MJ, it's all-time great rim pressure and finishing, and they round it out with great skill in a number of different ways. But Kobe's all-time trait is there. It's the difficult shot making, but that's just not as valuable as I can create a 45% three for myself whenever I want it if I'm Steph Curry, which is equivalent to like a shot at the rim. It's that efficient because the shot is worth an extra point. And because everybody's so worried about that shot, I can free up layups for my teammates just by running pick and roll 35 feet out because they're going to blitz me, or just by curling around a screen off ball and I draw two defenders and somebody else slips right to the rim, right? That ability to manufacture layup offense, either for yourself or your teammates, is not something that Kobe possessed. That's the reason that I have him here. I know I said a lot there, but I always feel like I have to say a lot about Kobe because he's such an interesting and kind of complicated player to talk about.
I'm just shocked that, I mean, that means that you have Jerry West behind him.
I do have Jerry West behind him. I have Jerry West in my 5 spot.
I kind of can't believe that.
Well, why don't you make the case first? Why do you have Jerry above Kobe?
Well, I mean, I think as offensive engines, I think you could argue that they're even, or maybe West surpasses him, but I think defensively, West definitely takes the cake there. I mean, West in the regular season at his peak, I specifically went 64-66, is giving you 36-6 on 56.9% true shooting throughout the 60s. West is leading in a few seasons the entire NBA in true shooting percentage. He's literally the most efficient guard of the era a few years. And then when you look in the...
Yeah, I was just going to say, because Oscar also leads in true shooting percentage, but it's literally a club of 4 guards who have ever done it. It's Nash, it's Steph, it's West, and it's Oscar. So they're the GOATs of guard efficiency.
And then when you look at what he was doing in the playoffs, he's given you 36. That's not 36. And 36 points, 6 boards, and 5 assists a night on 55.8% true shooting. Again, a really great number for that time period. And then in the finals across these 3 seasons, this is a 12-game sample size, he gives you 34, 6, and 4. So, I don't know. I think unequivocally, I think West is the better defensive player between the two. I think West is an underrated defensive player, a really great defensive playmaker, and just defender in general of his era. But he's also an elite scorer and a solid enough playmaker to where I think his total value does surpass Kobe. Like, it's close for me. And like I mentioned earlier when we were talking about Kobe, I did consider Kobe taking this 4 spot. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if people hold the fact that West didn't win a title until he was so old against him or what it is. I don't really care even. The guy got so close so many times and was just on the doorstep that it doesn't really factor into me. But I don't know. I know you're a very big Jerry West fan. I know you're an adamant supporter, and you go to battle for Jerry a lot. I thought he was going to be a lock to be a top 4 guy.
I mean, it's just he's going up against Kobe. Like, it's the same thing. There's no disrespect to any of these guys. This entire range of Kobe, West, Oscar, Shai, they're all super close. I think that they're all absolutely incredible players. I do love Jerry West, and I'll read off some other numbers. I mean, I went with 65-70 for his peak, but the regular season production is equally ridiculous. Plus 8% relative true shooting. Also, I should clarify, I said it's those 4 guards. There are other guards who have done it. It's those 4 guards among like these top 10 peaks who we're talking about. John Stockton has done it. There have been some shooters in recent years. Kyle Korver led in true shooting. I think Joe Harris did it, but I'm talking about like all-time guards who we're talking about on this context. It's those 4 dudes who I mentioned, but it's just ridiculous. In the playoffs, over 6 years, 33, 5, and 7 on plus 7% relative true shooting. He's got the second best playoff scoring resume we've ever seen from a guard, only to Michael Jordan. I don't even know if that's arguable. I'll say the numbers again. 6 years, 33, 5, and 7 on plus 7% relative true shooting. It's absurd. He was an excellent ball handler. He had great quickness. He had great deceptiveness, change in direction, efficiency of movement. I mean, that's something that stands out with West. Just everything is so purposeful. He was a great driver, great finisher, elite mid-range shooter, really good playmaker. Another guy who ate up free throws at an all-time rate. Him and Oscar both are in the double digits routinely. And in terms of the playmaking, that's an area where in the early 60s and even like the early mid 60s, West wasn't as developed, but he really did round out his game later on in the late 60s and in the early 70s. Like, you even get to a point where he leads the league in assists. So he figured out how to strike that balance more effectively too. Even though he's not an all-time great playmaker, he was a very good one. And he is a great defensive guard. Good size, good vertical athleticism, 6'9" wingspan. I agree with you that he is clearly a better defensive player than Kobe. I wish that we had the numbers for his whole career. They didn't track stocks until the last year of his career, 1974, when he was old and he only played 33 games that year, I believe. But in that season, even understanding that context, he still averaged 3.3 stocks per game. I think the career numbers for him would be crazy. I think he's a top 5 shot blocking guard ever. I mean, just by the eye test, I would guess that there are years that he averaged over a block a game, probably years he averaged 3+ steals a game. He was hugely disruptive with his hands too. So he's one of the most complete guards we've ever seen. He could play either guard position. He's an all-time scorer in terms of volume and efficiency, and very well-rounded as a scorer. He's a high-level playmaker, and he's an elite defender. Like, I think you just have to respect Jerry West, or, fuck off, man. I mean, listen, we're somebody who respects eras here, and like we always talk about judging people relative to competition.
I hope somebody chops that up and makes a Jerry West edit, man.
Yeah, bro, you should, because he's the logo and he's the GOAT. The reason I have Kobe above him, I mean, it's really, really close. I do think the off-ball scoring gap is there, and that's something that I love so much about Kobe as an offensive engine that I also think can get underrated, right? You focus so much on efficiency. Kobe is able to stress the defense every second he's on the floor, and he's able to fit alongside other guys who need the ball in their hands. If that's another guard, if it's a dominant big, he can play off of players in a way that I think is underrated and is extremely valuable. So that's where, even though he doesn't quite have the same efficiency, I actually do ever so slightly prefer him as an offensive player, because even if he doesn't quite have the scoring resume of West, and even if he doesn't have the assist numbers of West, I think some of Kobe's offensive impact isn't showing up in the stat sheet there. What he did in 06, 07, I mean, it's truly incredible offensive floor raising, the amount by which he's improving those kind of bum squad offenses he had around him. So that's my rationale. I don't have a problem with you having West at number 4, though. I am a Jerry West truther, absolutely. And I do think Jerry's better than Oscar because of the two-way gap, even though Oscar is the best offensive player of the 60s. With that, Logan, let's move in to our top 3. I think we are about to enter a debate that I've seen going around a lot, contentious, lots of people talking about it right now. People even asked us to address this in our all-time debate show, and we said, no, we'll save it for the top 10 guard peaks. And I'm talking about, of course, Magic Johnson versus Steph Curry. Who is it who is in your 3rd spot, Logan?
I put Magic at 3. I'm taking Steph in this debate. What about you?
I have Magic at 3 as well.
It's very close, and I think, maybe your answer could depend on the era of basketball that's being played. I think Magic fits his era, but I think Steph Curry changed the game. I think Steph has had the greatest impact and influence on the game of basketball, maybe more than any other player in NBA history. And I mean, Magic is great at his peak. 87 to 89, he's leading out 2 number 1 offenses, 1 number 2 offense. He's basically leading out a top offense every single year. These are 2 all-time offensive engines. Magic is one of the greatest passers, and you were talking about it earlier, I think, with Steve Nash. The sheer audacity of Magic, like, Magic just had crazy balls. Like, the shit that he was trying and doing out there, like,
never seen anything like it.
There's
Nash
just shit.
Nash is the closest. I mean, Nash and Jokic are probably the, not just 2nd and 3rd greatest passers ever, but the 2nd and 3rd most audacious too, but Magic is 1.
Yeah, Magic's, he passes sexually, man. I mean, it is just nasty. It It's unlike anything you ever see. Like, you watch it, and how did he do that? The ball will teleport sometimes. You don't even see the pass.
Yeah.
The stuff that Magic was doing was really special. And so, all-time special passer in the half court, in transition. You're getting a guy with great size, too. I mean, it was unheard of to have a ball handler that was 6'9" at that time. So, I mean, he can make passes that other guys can't even dream of because he can see over the defense. You're also getting other good value with him rebounding positionally in comparison to other guys. So, you're getting an all-time offensive engine. You're getting a really good rebounder. You're getting the greatest passer of all time. The real difference to me is in the scoring ability and how they shape defenses. And, of course, it's different eras, but I really do think Steph Curry just changed the game with his play style. Like, defenses had to shape what they were doing around Steph and had to defend Steph in such a specific way that I think it changes the geometry and the math for everybody else on the basketball court. Don't get me wrong. You had to keep your eyes in the back of your head when you're playing a guy like Magic Johnson because he's going to make passes that you don't even see. And if you fall asleep for a split second, that ball is where it needs to be, and he is setting somebody up for a shot. The same thing goes for Steph Curry, though. You fall asleep for a second on defense, Steph is relocated around the screen, and bang, he's killing you for a three. To me, that really is the big difference to me. The scoring ability and the stress that Steph Curry can cause a defense on and off ball. Both of these guys shape defenses. Both of these guys, you had to defend a specific way, and you could never fall asleep on either of them. I just think Steph's gravity, we always talk about it. I really do think Steph's gravity is what puts him over the top. And, yeah, he's got the greatest touch I've ever seen. He is the greatest shooter I've ever seen. He is the greatest shooter of all time. I don't want to say Steph's skill set and ability is more rare.
I think they're both one of one in NBA history.
They are. So I won't say more rare. I think it's more valuable, and that's why Steph's higher to me.
I have Magic at number 3, and I just want to talk about him first because, of course, I'm going to yap about both these guys because I'm a generational yapper. I do want to emphasize how incredible Magic is and how close this is and how much I do think it comes down to kind of a matter of preference stylistically between ball dominance and off-ball value and floor raising versus ceiling raising. But Magic let out a number of the greatest offenses ever. And specifically from 87 to 90, which is when he wins 3 MVPs in 4 years, and he's at his absolute best. Regular season, he's giving you 22, 7, and 12 on plus 7% relative true shooting. Playoffs, 21, 6, and 12 on plus 7% relative true shooting. So incredible efficiency. And this is the stretch when he just becomes fully realized as an offensive player. This is when, with Kareem's significant decline, and by 87, he's no longer an all-star caliber player. By 89, he's just like a 10-point per game guy. By 1990, he's retired, and the Lakers are still the number one offense in basketball with Kareem gone. But that requires Magic upping his volume as a scorer, and this is when he peaks as a scorer, and he does increase that volume while maintaining elite efficiency. I just think he's so underrated as a scorer. I talk about this with Nash. I talk about it with Chris Paul. But it's such a real phenomenon where people think if you didn't score 25 points per game, you weren't an elite scorer. And there are just instances in which it's not true, in which guys had elite scoring skill sets, but they're all-time great passers, and they choose to more often leverage their scoring threat into playmaking opportunities for their teammates. And that's what Magic did, but the guy was a really damn good scorer. I mean, first of all, he's a walking mismatch problem. He's 6'9", highly skilled, out of the post, had a hook, had a runner, a couple of really reliable shots for him. He was a strong mid-range shooter at this time and a great free throw shooter. That's another big improvement for Magic once you get into the late 80s. It's that jump shooting. He is quietly like one of the best free throw shooters we've ever seen at this stage in his career, where he's up like 87, 88% pretty consistently. And he's got totally unique downhill speed and a handle and body control for being 6'9" at this time. Like you said, the league had never seen anything like that. He was also just great at finding angles as a driver out of pick and roll. He got to the line a lot, and he's arguably the best transition player we've ever seen. And I think it's him versus LeBron. And while LeBron is more of a straight-up freight train and I think is the better transition scorer. The difference is Magic just got out in transition so much more. Like there are stretches where LeBron wants to strangle the pace. He wants to be a sort of half-court surgeon. Magic, it was always go, 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 go as much as anybody in NBA history. More so, I would say, than anybody in NBA history. And he is the best passer we've ever seen. His audacity is unmatched. His creativity between transition and the half court is unmatched. And I do think that Nash is the closest in all of these areas, just in terms of creating and trying angles that you don't even think are there. Like, how is he going to fit that pass in there? How did he even see that pass? Those are the top two.
Even more than Jason Kidd or like Jokic.
Kid's a good one. The thing that's tough about Kidd is Kidd never had the scoring threat to leverage. And so that's why I think that both Nash and Magic are clear as playmakers.
I will say some of Kidd's transition passes just make me go, just leaves my jaw on the floor.
Incredible. Magic is the best transition passer ever, though. Jokic, it's just different. Jokic is making different kinds of passes. Like when I'm thinking about Nash and Magic, I'm thinking about stuff out of pick and roll. I'm thinking about plays coming downhill as a driver. Whereas Jokic, obviously, he runs inverted pick and roll and he can make passes from everywhere. But a lot of his passing is coming out of the post, spotting cutter, spotting shooter. So he's extremely audacious as well. I just think Nash and Magic are more similar in the kinds of passes they attempt. But the difference is Magic is 6'9", and so he just has every single angle available to him. He can see everything on the floor. He can make passes over defenders of all sizes, and it's just ridiculous. He's also a rim assist machine like Nash, willing to try things to create the most efficient offense he can for his teammates, and more often than not, by a fair bit, that paid off. So it's just incredible what he did. He led 3 number 1 offenses in these years and 1 number 2 offense. And again, he led the number 1 offense after Kareem had retired. Magic was an automatic top tier offense throughout his career. I believe he led 7 number 1 offenses throughout the 80s. So it's just absurd. I will say at this point in his career, he was not the rebounder or the defensive playmaker that he was earlier in his career. He was a very mediocre defender. Not that he was ever a plus defender really, but he at this point didn't have the lateral quickness to guard guards. He wasn't an impactful secondary rim protector. And earlier in his career, I mean, he could at least generate like 2.5, 3 steals a game for you. He wasn't doing that at this point. But the Lakers were able to pretty easily just like hide him on 4s defensively. And he was a fine post defender and he was a good rebounder. At this time, it was not difficult to do that. This is not today's NBA, right? Not even close to it. You weren't seeing a lot of switching. You weren't seeing even a lot of pick and roll from a number of teams. You weren't seeing mismatch attacking. That just wasn't in the zeitgeist at that time. So I think although he is a mediocre defender, he wasn't targeted defensively like maybe he would be in today's NBA, but I'm just judging him within the context of his era. So this is still the best he ever was because it's his offensive peak. And it's a top 5 offensive peak ever. Like the offense is just too great to have him any lower. You have to understand putting the ball in Magic Johnson's hands for 48 minutes meant you were going to be a top 2 offense in basketball, basically throughout his entire career, while he wasn't going to be a liability defensively like a Nash, who was a significant defensive liability. I just think the guy's an absolute genius, but I do slightly prefer Steph. And I can get into why, unless there's anything you want to add, because I am going to yap about Steph for a bit too. But I'll just keep rolling.
I mean, I agree with you, bro. I think Steph's better.
All right, well, here's why I think that Steph is ever so slightly better. The peak I'm choosing for him is 2016 to 2021. In the regular season over that span, 28, 5, and 6 on like plus 9.5% relative true shooting. Twice led the league in true shooting percentage as a guard. And I think both these guys make a case for being the best offensive player ever. I think that Steph's is a bit more distinct, and I do prefer it personally because Steph has like this unfathomable pick and roll and isolation efficiency where out of pick and roll, he can extend defenses out further than anybody we've ever seen with his range. And his combination of ball handling and 3-point shooting is like nothing we've ever seen. So the guy can absolutely humiliate people off switches in isolation and in pick and roll. all conventional coverages basically were broken the second that Steph Curry entered the league, right? You couldn't play drop against him, obviously, because you cannot concede comfortable pull-up threes to him. But if you try to blitz, well, especially when he's got Draymond Green alongside him who can take advantage of those 4-on-3s, you're fucked. But that's the thing. Defensively, you have to compromise yourself to deal with Steph out of pick and roll. You have to send multiple bodies, which means his entire team is playing with an advantage. Off ball, there are times where you're going to dedicate 2 guys to Steph, and he's going to cause confusion and chaos with his shooting threat and his incredible, relentless off ball movement. That's going to lead to a layup or a dunk for a teammate of his. Like, we see this stuff all the damn time, but he also is insane on ball. And it's just absurd, the impact he had on team offense. Like, his impact metrics at his peak are pretty much unmatched by anybody ever. They are unmatched by any guard who we're talking about today. Over these years, the Warriors were a plus 13 net team with him on the court. They had a plus 16 on off differential with Steph. Plus 16 is insane over a 5-year sample. And if we exclude the 2020 disaster season, which is when Steph played 6 games and the Warriors were the worst team in the league, even if we take out all of those losses that they suffered without Steph that season, over this span, the Warriors were still just 27-32 without Steph. They were 266-75 with him. It's a 37-win pace without him versus a 64-win pace with him. And there's so much evidence of just how clearly he was the most important player of the Warriors dynasty, even when Kevin Durant was on the team. Like, if you look at these years, when Steph played without KD, when they were on the same team, the Warriors went 27-4. When KD played without Steph, the Warriors went 23-17. Like, with him, they're still an all-time great team without Kevin Durant. With KD without Steph, they're just like a good team, like a slightly above average team. And Steph also got the Warriors to the finals in 2019 without Kevin Durant, who was hurt, when they had their weakest overall roster of the last 5 years at that time. So, like, it's incredible. He is the GOAT offensive ceiling raiser because of his ability to amplify his teammates so much without even having to touch the ball. Kevin Durant's life could not conceivably have been made easier by any other player in NBA history than it was by playing with Steph Curry, and I think that is true for a number of guys because his gravity is so unique, makes him such a one-of-a-kind offensive engine. But he is also an underrated floor raiser because I call him the GOAT ceiling raiser because there are certain guys who, like LeBron, you put the ball in his hands every possession, he can do incredible things and bring you such a high offensive floor. Jokic, you give him 100 and something touches a game, he's going to produce unbelievable results for team offense. Those guys, I think, do surpass Steph as floor raisers. Where Steph is at his absolute best is when you put him alongside other good players who are really good play finishers, who are good connective passers, who can make the most of playing off of Steph's constant attention, again, even without him having to have the ball every possession. That's when he maxes out the value of a team more so than anybody else ever. But also as a floor raiser, he is incredible. And like, I think the 2021 season is the greatest evidence of that. When Steph gives you 32, 6, and 6 on 66% true shooting, they went 37 and 26 with him, 1 and 8 without him. We just talked about this season and this roster, but it was a very similar team to the one that had just had the worst record in the NBA. Kent Bazemore is starting games. James Wiseman is starting games. Juan Toscano-Anderson is starting games. It's ridiculous, and Steph still has them playing at a 50-win pace. Like, that combination of GOAT ceiling raising with unbelievable floor raising with underratedly all-time great playoff performances. Steph averaged 27, 6, and 6 on plus 6.5% relative true shooting in this span. I think a number of his runs are underrated. If it's 2017 and 2018, because KD wins finals MVP those years because he has the bigger raw scoring numbers. If it's 2015, which I'm not even counting in Steph's peak because I think he took the leap really in 2016, but 2015, the guy averaged like 28 a game in a title run on unbelievable efficiency, and that run somehow gets talked down on. Steph just does things that nobody else in the history of the game has ever done. And compared to Magic, I do slightly prefer Steph because of that incredible offensive versatility. Whereas Magic, again, the guy was an automatic top-tier offense, but he was very ball dominant. Steph, we have seen show a truly unique ability among even the offensive greats to thrive in so many different ways with different types of personnel. The ridiculous efficiency with him is even greater than it is with Magic. And again, I am somebody who values ceiling raising a little bit more than floor raising, because I think the ultimate goal is to be the best team you can possibly be. It's to win a title. It's to take a good team and make them a juggernaut, more so than it is to take a not good team and make them above average or good. And I don't want to oversimplify it, because it's not like Magic was, doing a 2017 Russ, where he's just like trying to get you to average offensively through volume. The guy was leading some of the best offenses we've ever seen, and still I think that Steph is the even better ceiling raiser, and that's why I go with him.
You were talking about KD fitting alongside Steph, and I think it's the inverse is true too, man. I think it's impressive that Steph was able to work alongside KD, man. Anytime you got star power like that, you're going to have to accept a lesser role, and I do think that's a major advantage in Steph's way, just how impactful he can be on ball and off ball. That you were talking about, like Kobe's ability to succeed with the ball in other guys' hands, like off ball. Steph's one of the greatest off-ball players ever, and that's where a huge part of his value is coming out, where you can just run him
in a tier of his own, honestly.
Yeah, you can run him literally all game, man. Running corner to corner, like you got to keep up. And I think that ability to stress the defense every second on the court, wherever on the court, is just inherently more valuable. And he's got some of the greatest handles ever, and he's great at a pick and roll. And this version of Steph, too, could get downhill, could get to the basket, still had that athletic pop and burst. And I don't know how people can still hold those sentiments, man. You were talking about like them trying to denigrate how great he was with those KD teams. And granted, they are super teams, but it's like I think Steph dispelled all of those when he won a championship in 2022 with Wiggins and them. Obviously, I don't think that should be included in this peak, because I think that's a different version of Steph. But he won one pre-KD. He won one post-KD, man.
I also think Steph's efficiency inside the arc gets underrated. And I think that's another instance of him, being able to leverage the greatest shooting threat we've ever seen into, as you were mentioning, opportunities to get downhill where you're just extending the defense so ridiculously far out. And he's fast. He can get downhill himself. Also, obviously, one of the all-time great mid-range shooters. But, over these years, man, Steph's splits, 2-point percentage of 56. That is elite for a guard. That is incredible. 3-point percentage of 43, 91% from the line. Just an absolute one-of-a-kind offensive wonder, as is Magic. And that's why, personally, I have no problem with anybody having Magic above Steph. I think it's really, really, really close, and I think it does kind of come down to what's your cup of tea. I will tolerate zero disrespect for either one. But number one on this list, Logan, is about as clear-cut as it gets. Who is it?
Greatest scorer of all time. The GOAT! That's why he's the GOAT! Dude, Jordan's numbers don't make any sense from this run, man. 91 and 93 in the regular season. He's given you 31, 6 and 6 with 2.5 steals a game. In the playoffs, he's given you 34, 6 and 7 with 2 steals a game.
On awesome efficiency.
On ridiculous efficiency. In the finals, 17-game sample size over these 3 years, 36, 7, and 8 on 53, 42, 81 splits, 59.1% true shooting with 2 steals a game. MJ's the greatest, man. Can do it on ball, can do it off ball. That's what I think gets lost about MJ too, man. We're talking about it with Kobe and Steph. MJ's a hell of an off-ball scorer too, and that's where a ton of his value's coming from. I don't know, man. I think people kind of get this view of LeBron is so ball down. Not every superstar, that's one of MJ's special skills to me. And of course, it's with the triangle offense with Phil Jackson and them, but say we're running through him, but it is his ability to let somebody else initiate the offense and let him relocate and go do work off ball. And then when he is on ball, he is not only a freakish athlete that can blow by people and get to the rim, and he's a ridiculously great acrobatic finisher, but he's also one of the best jump shooters in the league. And he's shifty, and he's got a handle, and he can play make where, look, I know that when we bring up these finals, everybody wants to talk about how banged up the 91 Lakers were. Yes, they were injured. They were not at full health. I think that is important to recognize. It doesn't change the fact that MJ's dropping 11 dimes a game in that series and playmaking his ass off. You're getting the total package with MJ at this stage in his career. Like I mentioned with Kobe, you are getting, in my opinion, the perfect blend of athleticism and elite, difficult shot making and jump shooting. You are getting a way better defender, in my opinion, one of the best in the game at this stage in his career in MJ. And you're getting a pretty damn good playmaker, man. This is not only the greatest guard peak of all time, I think it is the greatest peak in basketball history. I think this is the greatest a basketball player has ever been. I feel like Michael Jordan is so great. It sometimes gets boring talking about how great he is, man. I think it can sometimes get like, oh, we talking about MJ again? Yes, we are, because he's that damn good.
Dude, honestly, MJ is probably underrated today. Like, if you just take the median discourse, which is insane to say about a guy who was considered the GOAT.
He played against a bunch of plumbers, man.
Like, and this is coming as somebody who does think that LeBron is the overall GOAT because of longevity and because his peak is really, really close to MJ's, but I do prefer MJ's peak. But, like, you can become numb to these numbers when they're so fucking stupid. All the way from 89 to 93. The guy averaged 32, 7, and 6 on plus 6% relative true shooting. And in the playoffs, he averaged 34.5, 7, and 7 on plus 4.5% relative true shooting. And by the way, I'm not including in those numbers 87 when he averaged 37 a game and 88 when he averaged 35 a game. And he averaged 36 a game in both those playoffs. I'm not including those just because I don't think he was at his peak yet. I mean, like, what the hell, man? We've never seen anything close to it.
What's the difference? What do you think he got better at that made that his peak?
So I'm glad you asked, Logan. 89 is when I think he takes his leap as a playmaker and a jump shooter while he maintains like his peak athleticism and defense. I think his absolute peak, though, starts in 91 because at that point, you get another leap in terms of his basketball IQ, in my opinion, his ability to play off ball. That's when you get like those crazy low turnover numbers from MJ that in terms of volume scoring, it's like MJ and Shai are the two guys who can give you 30 a game and also turn the ball over less than 2.5 times. And MJ got stronger, where I think, honestly, his playoff runs in 89 and 90 get underrated. He still fucking diced up Detroit if you look at the numbers. And he diced up Detroit with really subpar offensive dudes around him. So like this idea that it's like, oh, you could beat up MJ. It's like, all right, man, beat him up and he still gives you 31, 7, and 7 on good efficiency. But I do think that he was even stronger by 91. So that's the best basketball player we've ever seen. That's the best rim finishing guard of all time. That's the best athlete in the sport. That's an extremely dangerous off-ball weapon who was the best mid-range shooter in the game at this sport. Unequivocally the best scorer of all time. Never seen anything like it. And not only is that scoring volume and efficiency, especially in the playoffs, like totally untouchable, he was such a good playmaker at this point. He could pick you apart with his passing. He was a strong plus defender. We talked about it with Kobe, him being overrated defensively. I think historically there was probably some overrating of MJ defensively. Like if somebody tries to tell you MJ is a top 5 defender of all time, all right, they need to chill. But also if somebody tells you that MJ isn't a top 50 defender of all time, well, then they're wrong. Like, I want to be clear, it's very different from Kobe. MJ overall throughout his career was a significantly better defensive guard than Kobe. I do think that MJ is one of the best defensive guards we've seen, but was he delivering DPOY value year after year? No, but he was an elite defensive playmaker. He was the best shot blocking guard we've ever seen. I mean, he's the best defensive playmaking guard we've ever seen overall, I would say. Awesome rebounding guard, like uniquely great rebounding guard. His athleticism was just one of a kind, and so it naturally made him so impactful in all those different areas. He's leading the best offense in basketball over these years. I just think he's the most perfect player we've ever seen, and he's the best ceiling raiser of all time because of, again, the off-ball value that he brings, being so damn good at everything on the basketball court, being so flexible stylistically. It is a unique thing from a guy who was also just flat out the best player that we've seen in the history of the sport at his absolute best.
I think numb was a good word for it, man. That's what I was thinking about. Just like, I feel like anytime you bring up MJ, people like might roll their eyes or like shrug. Oh, it's MJ. It's like, yeah, bro, it's MJ. I hope people don't get like that with LeBron when we get old, man. And then it's just gonna be like a vicious cycle.
And obviously, like, there are numbers with LeBron that are so fucking stupid that you're like, holy shit, how is that real? I mean, you look at, like, the numbers from the 2017 and 2018 playoffs, and you're like, all right, this dude was just averaging 33, 9, and 8.5 on the regular. But MJ, the scoring stuff, it's another level. It's another level. To average 35, 7, and 7 with really good efficiency for not 1 year, not a couple years, the better part of a decade in the playoffs, I think you can become numb to it. And I think it sucks so much when our generation, Logan, it's our generation that's guilty of this, tries to disrespect such an amazing basketball player just because they've got a different GOAT and they want to prop him up. Hey, guys, we need not hate.
Bars.
We need not hate just to promote the greatness of one player. We don't need to take down another, Logan. I think you could learn about that with Domantas Sabonis, although oftentimes you're not even promoting the greatness of another player. You're just rabidly raving about Domantas Sabonis, just straight hating.
Stop hating. Start appreciating.
Yep.
Michael Jordan, now granted, this is not during his absolute peak. This is his entire career. He led the regular season in scoring 10 times. He led the playoffs in scoring 10 times.
In 11 healthy seasons in Chicago. 10 of 11.
Yeah.
Stupid. Nobody was on his planet. The only time that he didn't lead the league in scoring, he was a rookie. And he averaged 28 a game as a rookie. It is stupid, man. It really is stupid. This was a fun list, man. I'm trying to think. I mean, I kind of want to give some more shout outs on the outskirts. But I think we covered the guys who I strongly considered.
Yeah, I mean, I did briefly consider Clyde Drexler.
I was going to say Clyde Frazier. Big ups to Clyde Frazier.
I did briefly consider Isaiah Thomas.
What about Clyde Frazier? Did you consider Clyde Frazier?
A little bit. I also considered, I low-key considered, not like super heavily, maybe like a top 15 list, Kevin Johnson a little bit.
KJ's peak was nasty. It was
KJ
nasty.
was nice.
Jason Kidd has to be mentioned.
I did. The efficiency stuff is what soured me on Kidd, but yeah, I did. How much?
Yeah.
I know I don't think we've had like an expansive conversation on this before. How responsible do you think he was individually for them having the number one defense, the Nets, consistently when he was there? Is that more him? Is that more the team? Is that more Kenyon? Like, who deserves the share of credit for that?
I think Kidd deserves a lot of credit for that. I mean, I think that Kidd was clearly a better defensive player than offensive player. I think he's the best defensive point guard, at least, that we've ever seen. I mean, his matchup versatility, just absolutely incredible. The year before he got there, they were the number 23 defense, and then the next year they were the number 1 defense, both of those seasons. So I do think he was the best defender on those teams. Now, do I think he single-handedly transformed them into being that great defensively? No, I don't think there's a guard in the history of the game who could do that. But I think is a huge part of the reason that they were such a great defense, and that's the reason that they were in back-to-back finals. You know, he did a good offensive floor-raising job. I want to be clear because, like, Kidd's offense was very flawed, especially in the half court. The efficiency sucks, but still, I mean, he was the only thing holding those offenses together to even be competent, and I think that he does deserve credit for that. So I think he's somewhere in the top 15 probably, but really, I only considered 12 guys. Luka and Harden were the 2 tough cuts for me, and everybody after that is just kind of like a shout out to shout him out. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Shout out to all of you. Hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, we've got so much more content like it. We're ranking the top 10 players by position in today's NBA. We had an all-time sports debate show this past week. We got a bunch of fun trivia collabs. Like, it's Nerd Sesh summer, baby. We're diving into all the historical stuff that we love so much. So that's all over our YouTube channel. You can listen to all the shows across all audio platforms, and you can follow us across social media, TikTok and Instagram at NerdSesh, Twitter at Nerd_Sesh. You can also join our Discord if you want to chat with the gang over there. And with that, as always, appreciate you guys. I've been Carson Breber.
I have been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.